Story 1. Going with James Harrison, also known as the Man with the Golden Arm. He was an Australian blood plasma donor whose plasma contained antibodies against RHD. His plasma was used in making a treatment for rhesus disease. Because of this, he made over 1,100 blood donations, saving the lives of 2.4 million babies. Story 2. Jonas Salk deserves a mention for not only developing the polio vaccine but also for sharing its formulation rather than personally profiting as much as he could have. Story 3. Louis Pasteur has got to be a contender. Vaccination, pasteurization, germ theory, microbiology, the benefits of his work to mankind are absolutely staggering. Story 4. Jonas Salk, polio vaccine, and Alexander Fleming, penicillin, are responsible for two of the most impactful medical advances of the 20th century. Rather than immediately seeking patents, they shared their findings with the entire scientific community so that they could be developed further and utilized to the benefit of mankind. Fleming was famously furious when others patented methods of penicillin production, saying, "I found penicillin and have given it free for the benefit of humanity. Why should it become a profit-making monopoly?" Story 5. Stanislav Petrov for having his finger on the nuclear button and not pressing it. He deemed the 4 threats received as false alarms. Norman Borlaug is credited with saving 1 billion lives based on his work in agronomy. Story 6. Vasily Arkhipov, the Soviet submariner who refused to launch a nuclear torpedo during the Cuban Missile Crisis, likely preventing nuclear war. Jonas Salk, the doctor who not only invented the polio vaccine, but chose not to patent it so it could be widely distributed. Story 7. My grandfather never smoked or drank alcohol, never swore or raised his voice to anyone. He was religious, even though I'm not. He was the most consistent man I've met. He never judged anyone, treated everyone with respect, and, from what I heard from his children, was a wonderful father who raised them without ever hitting them or yelling. As a grandfather, I only have wonderful memories of him. He was the best role model whom I can never hope to emulate. My father died before I was 2, and he became the male role model of my life. He bought a new suit for my wedding even though he was over 90. He's been dead for 34 years, and I still think of him and miss him. Story 8. Alexander Fleming. He is the person you learned about in high school whose name everyone always forgets. The man who accidentally discovered penicillin because he forgot his sandwich. Later on, when he found parts of it were covered in mold and parts where there was none at all, he realized what happened. Something was killing the mold. When he shared the discovery with the world, he essentially became the father of modern medicine. That one single accidental discovery has probably saved more lives than anyone else in history as far as I am aware. Story 9. Sir Francis Bacon and René Descartes invented the modern scientific thought process. Most of the things on this list would have been impossible without their insistence that science not be based upon assumed ideas of how reality works. They removed confirmation bias and the fallacy of assumption from the scientific process and allowed dogma to be ignored in favor of experimental data. Story 10. I believe Johannes Gutenberg is the most influential person in history. Without his invention of the printing press, the dissemination of knowledge on a large scale would not have been possible. Many of the other figures mentioned, while incredibly important, might not have had the same impact if their ideas could not have been shared so widely and efficiently. In many ways, Gutenberg made all of the others possible. Story 11. I'll submit Henrietta Lacks, whose seemingly immortal cancer cell line has been the building blocks of modern medicine. If we are going by the total number of lives saved, she would be high on the list. Story 12. David Attenborough. The man educated a multitude of generations over the years and spent most of his time trying to make the world better, and not just for us. Story 13. Could just be the unsung, regular people who, in spite of whatever adversities and unpleasantness they may encounter, try to live showing love and kindness, even or especially, when the world does not show it back. Or maybe Keanu Reeves. Not too sure. Story 14. I don't know if he ranks among the greatest achievers of human history, but Mr. Winton saving 669 Jewish children from the Nazis for no reason other than knowing it was the right thing to do deserves recognition in my opinion. Story 15. Depends on what you mean by great. Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great were great at conquering. People like Jesus or Muhammad have entire segments of the globe talking about their teachings daily. Figures like Socrates or Aristotle are the foundation of entire schools of philosophy. Individuals like Newton understood the natural world as an afterthought. And the list goes on. Someone harnessed fire. Someone invented the wheel. Someone domesticated animals. Story 16. Henrietta Lacks had cells that were harvested without her knowledge. These cells, from a rare and very fast-growing cancer, are in an uncountable number of laboratories throughout the world, being used for research to help humanity in every area of disease and in many other ways. The poor lady died young and never knew how widespread her cells would become. Many have profited from her, and she never saw any of the money, just the tragedy of dying. Story 17. We do not know their name. They lived a quiet life, being good to others without asking for much themselves. They did not seek fame or fortune and just made the world a better place. Story 18. Obviously, there's more to being great than being clever, but clever people seem to agree that John von Neumann was probably the cleverest. He summited Mount Cleverest. Story 19. Vasily Arkhipov, who in 1962 as a Russian nuclear submarine captain refused orders that would have resulted in a nuclear war, is a person to remember. You and I are likely alive today as a result of his decision. You should research him. He saved your life and the world, and you don't know his name. The world needs a holiday recognizing him. Story 20. A lot of research suggests that we give too much credit to people who invent things, thinking that without them we wouldn't have invention X, Y, or Z, or whatever. Most current research suggests that it's the maturation of underlying technology that often spurs innovation. So I'm inclined to give this award to someone outside of technology or new inventions. Probably this award should go to someone like the earlier mention of Fred Rogers. Someone who helped educate people on emotional maturity and affected people while young and impressionable. Though this person would more likely be from India or China than the United States, just based on population size and opportunity to make contact with them. Story 21. Probably the first person who figured out coffee. I mean, they single-handedly saved Mondays and gave humanity a reason to get out of bed for centuries. Without them, we would all still be staring blankly at walls. Truly, a hero among us. Story 22. At some point tens of thousands of years ago, there was a hominid who lacked a rational fear of fire, and as such began to play with it. That was the greatest human to have ever lived, as they would have the most greats preceding any grandparent designation. Story 23. Whichever cave person decided to rub two sticks together 1,000,000 years ago. Honestly, we couldn't have gotten this far without you if you're reading. Story 24. Robert Smalls was an enslaved man who bravely piloted a Confederate ship through a Union blockade during the Civil War, effectively escaping slavery and delivering the ship to the Union forces. He became a symbol of resistance and a powerful advocate for civil rights during Reconstruction-era politics. He later served in the United States House of Representatives as a representative from South Carolina. Story 25. There is no single person. Lots of great people contributed to humanity in different ways. There is no single great film, music, actor, poet, or writer. Story 26. Henrietta Lacks was an African-American woman whose cancer cells are the source of the HeLa cell line, the first immortalized human cell line and one of the most important cell lines in medical research. Her story is heart-melting too. Story 27. Jonas Salk dedicated 7 years to finding a cure for polio. Then he found it and refused to patent it. He could have made millions of dollars but chose not to. He truly cared about helping others more than any amount of money. Story 28. Nicholas Bostic, a local pizza delivery man, 25, was driving in a residential neighborhood in Lafayette, Indiana, when he saw a burning home. He entered the home through the back door, calling out to determine if anyone was inside. Hearing nothing, he went upstairs and saw an 18-year-old woman with two 13-year-old girls and a toddler, 20 months old. Leading them outside, they told him the 6-year-old remained inside. He re-entered the home and frantically searched the upstairs bedrooms as conditions worsened inside the home. As smoke filled the main level of the home, Bostic considered jumping through a window, but then heard the girl's cries. Following them, he returned to the main level, which was filled with smoke and blistering heat. With no visibility, he found the girl, picked her up, and retreated to the upper level. He entered a burning bedroom and punched through a window with his fist. With the girl in his arms, he jumped through to the ground. The girl suffered an injury to her leg from the broken glass, but she recovered. Bostic was hospitalized for 3 days, but he, too, recovered. Story 29. Gut reaction. Galileo. He showed us, literally, that we aren't the center of the universe and was punished for it. Almost everyone listed here had some profound accomplishment that you have to think would have been done anyway. They were just the first. Story 30. Raffi. If you don't know his name, you probably know his work. He wrote songs like Baby Beluga, Banana Phone, and many others. He popularized other songs like Down by the Bay. If you know these songs, it's most likely because he brought them to the mainstream in the 1980s and 1990s. He never sold out. He could have made millions selling his likeness and his songs for marketing. He could have put his face on lunchboxes, trinkets, and other items for parents to buy. But he didn't want a bunch of plastic Raffi merchandise to rot in landfills for thousands of years. He has used his influence to address climate change, bullying, child exploitation, and many other causes, all while continuing to entertain kids and be a good person. The guy is a global treasure. The world would be so much better if we had more people like Raffi. Story 31. Norman Borlaug. Geneticist and agricultural scientist who was a major figure in the Green Revolution. His contributions to plant yields and the ability for crops to grow in certain environments, especially in undeveloped countries, spearheaded agricultural science during his lifetime. By the end of his career, many World Health and Food Science organizations credited his research with saving over 1 billion lives from starvation. Story 32. If we're going by most influential, I would vote for Marconi. Without radio waves, we would not have the level of global communication or broadcasting we now do. Story 33. I vote for Carl Sagan. His philosophies and commitment to educating the general population on the workings of the modern era are genuinely important and should not be overlooked. Without people like him, and arguably more importantly, people listening to him, we end up with future idiocracy. Story 34. Not including religious figures, I would say Aristotle. His contributions are still felt today and impacted so many different fields. Father of Western philosophy, father of formal logic, invented syllogistic reasoning, father of biology and zoology, classified over 500 species, foundational towards the development of argumentation, ethos, pathos, and logos, significant contributions to literature in poetics, laid initial groundwork for psychology, developed the ethical framework for virtue ethics, tutored Alexander the Great. Story 35. Since most scholars agree he existed, you could make an argument for Jesus Christ. Even if you don't believe his claim to divinity, to be able to preach a message of pure unconditional love that is so powerful and inspiring that it influences whole civilizations for 2,000 years is pretty great. Story 36. Ancient. The person to invent milling of wheat into flour. Modern. Fritz Haber, inventor of fertilizer. Without these two people and corresponding inventions, easily 90% of humanity would have never lived. Story 37. Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian doctor who worked as a chief physician of the obstetrics department of the St. Rochus Hospital from 1851 in Pest, pointed out the benefits of aseptic infection-preventing procedures in obstetrics and surgery. He figured out that students and colleagues were touching patients just after working with dead people without hand washing. He tried to spread his views both through his practice and his writings, but unfortunately, the medical community ignored him at the time. Later on, this practice was in place everywhere eventually, and only God knows how many patients and newborns have been saved since as a result of that. Story 38. It is obviously a very personal question because it calls for a single decision based entirely on opinion. With that in mind, I have to say my grandmother. She may not have cured cancer or discovered gravity, but she was the one who made sure I survived the unthinkable. To me, she was the greatest. I live every day trying to come in second. Story 39. I will not say the greatest because there are a lot of great people. But it is fascinating how much Nikola Tesla shaped the world. The world around you literally came from his creative imagination and the drive to not give up no matter how wild your aspirations. He foresaw the internet, the digital world, the electrical advancement of the Industrial Revolution, and laid the groundwork for all these things to come to fruition. Amazing how one man and his determination can accomplish so much, just believing in himself and making a path where there was none. Story 40. Sir Nicholas Winton saved the lives of 669 endangered children by smuggling them out of Czechoslovakia and into the United Kingdom during World War II. If I remember correctly, he never mentioned what he had done, and it wasn't until someone found a book with the names of the children he had saved that he even talked about it. Story 41. Not sure about the winner, but I'm going to give a shout out to the brave soul who saw spoiled, hard milk in a dead cow's guts and said, "Hell, I'll try that." Cheese discoverer, I tip my cap to you. Story 42. Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch both discovered how to massively produce ammonia, which is a precursor of fertilizers. Without it, Earth can barely sustain 8 billion people. Story 43. Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician and scientist of German descent who was an early pioneer of antiseptic procedures and was described as the savior of mothers. Despite his research, Semmelweis's observations conflicted with the established scientific and medical opinions of the time, and his ideas were rejected by the medical community. He could offer no theoretical explanation for his findings of reduced mortality due to hand-washing, and some doctors were offended at the suggestion that they should wash their hands and mocked him for it. In 1865, the increasingly outspoken Semmelweis allegedly suffered a nervous breakdown and was committed to an asylum by his colleagues. In the asylum, he was beaten by the guards. He died 14 days later from a gangrenous wound on his right hand that may have been caused by the beating. His findings earned widespread acceptance only years after his death when Louis Pasteur confirmed the germ theory, giving Semmelweis's observations a theoretical explanation. Joseph Lister, acting on Pasteur's research, practiced and operated using hygienic methods with great success.